The gambeson is a vital piece of equipment for any medieval kit. On its own, it's a fairly effective piece of armor. We can see on Guillaume's effigy that his gambeson just barely peeks out from the underneath his habergeon on his thighs, and then again on his forearms. It doesn't seem as if he's wearing any form of plate or mail defense on his forearms. It just seems to be just the gambeson, which isn't unheard of or unseen or uncommon in other effigies of the time and area. So this method that I'm taking to build this gambeson is based primarily off of a online tutorial that no longer exists anymore, unfortunately. But before it went down, I was able to snag a few pieces of information from it and an image. The image being the measurements, or the procedure for taking the measurements. And so I'm going to be going over all of those again, just to make sure that it's clear and everything. Just doing a little bit of explaining with it, and then providing my own measurements as an example of it. And then some other pieces of information like quilting and all that. So the gambeson that the tutorial in question copied, and essentially what we're going to be copying in this, is the Charles De Blois pourpoint, I believe is the name of it. Now that's a bit of a later style of gambeson. I'm not sure exactly when, but it's several decades after Guillaume's effigy was made in the 1350s. Unfortunately, it's, as far as I know, to the best of my knowledge, it's one of the only survivals of gambesons from the 14th century at all. So it's essentially the best that we have to go on. So that's what we're going to be going with. And even though it is a bit of a later style of gambeson, it still conforms roughly to the same style of the 1350s gambeson. That is rather close to the form-fitting to the body and everything, which, as we know, all armor really does, ultimately. And the gambeson is pretty much underneath all of that. So it's not that it doesn't matter necessarily, but it's not as big of a concern. So, without any further ado, let's jump right in. So quilting is by far the longest part of the procedure. I personally like to space each seam about 1.5 inches away from each other. The first thing I do is use the pencil to draw a light line where the stitching will go, and then I start the actual quilting. One thing I do when I'm doing this is to listen to something like an audiobook or a podcast or music, or maybe even a video by the illustrious knight errant, or, the mothers. It just helps me pass the time, and I get to learn something and keep my mind stimulated from the otherwise seemingly endless abyss of quilting by hand. You'll notice here that I'm not actually quilting the linen quite yet, and I'm going to show you why in just a moment. So I've got a bunch of pins there, so I pin the linen to the same side of the wool as the canvas, because that way, once we take it and we turn it inside out, the linen will be on the inside.